the 118th World Series that gets underway on Friday. Look, Anthony, I know you know this. The Astros are the significant favorite here at minus 190 over at BetMGM. It's their fourth trip to the Fall Classic in the last 6 seasons. Phillies are plus 155 at BetMGM. Phils are back in there. You know all this. They're back in the World Series for the first time since 2009. They won it in 2008. How do you assess from a big picture standpoint? We know the pitching matchup for game one. It's Nola v. Verlander, but how are you attacking this series? And probably a way to bet your Philadelphia Phillies. I'm aware of that, but give us your preview, how you go about looking at this series.
Yeah, the biggest advantage that the Astros have over the Phillies is their pitching depth. So starters number 1 and number 2, Nola and Wheeler for the Phillies against Verlander and Valdez for the Astros. You don't see too much of a difference between those 4 pitchers. They're all relatively comparable. The Astros will be at home, but you have to think that the Phillies have a decent chance of getting at least one game in Houston in those first 2, given how strong those 2 pitchers have been, not just all season, but especially in the playoffs. Wheeler's only allowed 2 runs in the playoffs. Nola did get blown up in San Diego, but prior to that had pitched 19 innings without allowing a run. That included 6 2/3 against Houston at the end of the regular season. So you like the Phillies, the first 2 games, to potentially get a split here. But the biggest difference between what the Phillies have done in the last 2 series, where they dominated the Braves and dominated the Padres at home, is that the Astros have a lot more pitching depth than those 2 teams. Of course, the Braves had Spencer Strider, who was coming off injury. Charlie Morton got hit with the line drive, wasn't the same after that. And the Padres didn't really have a game 4 starter with Mike Clevenger not recording an out. So the difference here is that the Astros have a huge pitching edge in games 3 and game 4. And I think that's going to be the difference in this series. Ranger Suarez will start game 3 for the Phillies. He would also be in line to start game 7. And I like Ranger personally, but this is a really bad matchup for him. He gave up 6 runs to the Astros at the end of the regular season in 3 innings. The lefty righty split against the Astros lineup is really bad for him. Houston dominates righty or lefties. So if you like the Phillies and you want to bet the Phillies, I actually think it's better to bet them minus 1.5 games, because Wheeler and Nola will start the first 4 of the first 6 games. You don't want a game 7 situation where Houston will have 2 or 3 really good long pitchers available, and the Phillies will be throwing Suarez with a lot of question marks behind him. I know it's one baseball game. Anything can happen. But I think if you like the Phillies, chasing a minus 1.5 plus 270 is a better bet than playing just their series price at plus 155, plus 160. Again, because in a potential game 7 in Houston, the Astros could have Christian Javier going, who is a dominant right-hander. Phillies will be going in a much more difficult pitching situation.
This Wednesday is only halfway over, and I've heard a lot about Ranger Suarez, way too much in this.
Love Ranger.
Go talk to our friend Colin Whitchurch. We did pay off pitch earlier this morning. He likes long shot pick to win World Series MVP, which now I ask you, and he meant long shot, by the way, for the record. But speaking of, World Series MVP is a fun prop to look at for a World Series. You're pretty much trying to find the guy that stands out the most over the course of the best of 7 series. How do you personally go about trying to find value on a World Series MVP, and who do you like?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to predict, because a lot of times it's the luck of who comes up in the big spot, who comes up with runners on base, and who gets that big hit. And, there's a lot of variance and randomness and volatility in trying to predict that. But there's one name that I've been targeting a lot of these playoffs and thinking about if the Phillies got there, he would be a guy that I would want, and it's Rhys Hoskins. Hoskins' entire career in Philadelphia has been summed up by peaks and valleys. He's been an incredibly streaky hitter. When he's hot, he's one of the hottest hitters on the planet. And when he's cold, he looks like he can't hit in major league pitching. And we've seen that in these playoffs. The first two games against St. Louis, struck out most of his at-bats, but it looks like he's starting to turn the corner. He's got that home run swing back. He had 4 hits in the NLCS. All 4 of them were home runs. He is well built for both ballparks. Of course, his home park in Philadelphia is a big hitter's park, but he also gets the Crawford boxes in left field on his pull side. That benefits Rhys, who is a heavy pull hitter for power. Hoskins has the ability to get hot, hit enough big home runs. And I do wonder, if Harper hadn't hit the home run, if the Phillies had just gone on to win that game 2-1, and they hadn't blown the lead and then Harper hits the home run, would Rhys Hoskins have been NLCS MVP? I think he would have. He hit the 2 home runs in game 4 and would have had the game-winning home run in game 5. So the way he's playing right now, I think Hoskins is my favorite long shot. He will get matchups with a couple of lefties in Framber Valdez So it's not a terrible matchup for him. And when Hoskins is hot, he's very tough to get out.
Yeah, it feels like the public money could come in on Harper because of the momentum from
he is the favorite, even though
round. Yep.
Even though the Phillies aren't favorites.
Right. He's the favorite of Phillies players at plus 700. Then Alvarez for Houston is at plus 600. Those are the two front runners right now for World Series MVP. Dabbundo, you're going to stick around because as we're going to transition now to Champions League soccer, we want to discuss today's slate. Here are your up-to-date Group D and Group B standings. You have a pair of picks on today's slate later this afternoon on the East Coast. The times, that is, when the matches start. But what are your two picks? What do you like?
Yeah, so my Tottenham Hotspur is hosting Sporting Lisbon in North London today. Spurs have come down a little bit on the money line. They opened around minus 220, 225. They've come down to about minus 190. I still like Sporting Lisbon plus one on the road. Lisbon's had excellent defensive metrics dating all the way back to last season in Portugal. I wrote a preview for this in the Action Network app. Spurs have been in a bit of a downturn lately, and it's coincided with some key injuries. Dejan Kulusevski as the third attacker, joining Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. His absence has made them struggle to break down low blocks, which is what we're going to see defensively from Sporting in this match. These two teams played in Portugal earlier in the group stage. It was a dead even match that Lisbon ended up winning 2-0 with 2 goals late in stoppage time. But again, they did an excellent job of stymieing Spurs. They did not give them any transition opportunities, which is exactly what Tottenham thrives on. So I think Lisbon comes with a clear game plan to sit deep and counterattack Tottenham. And Spurs have not been consistent enough at breaking down low blocks. They've been they look like they've regressed from last season's highs that they hit under Antonio Conte. So I'm taking Lisbon plus one.
Okay. What about your second pick for Champions League action today?
Yeah, we discussed this game at length on Wonder Goal. BJ is on Atletico. He took them on the money line. BJ Cunningham, my colleague. The line has come up a lot since he bet them. And now it's to the point where I'm actually coming back on Leverkusen plus one. Atletico was minus 115. They've gotten steamed all the way up to minus 160, 165. There's just not that big of a gap between these two teams when you look at their domestic performances. Atletico has scored 2 goals in this Champions League in 4 matches. They both came in stoppage time against Porto. Since then, they have not scored. They did not create over one expected goal in either of their 2 matches against Leverkusen and then the first match against Bruges. So this attack is just not nearly what it was in seasons past. Leverkusen has struggled of late. It's probably a reason for this line getting so inflated. They have struggled, but a lot of that's been driven by penalties and red cards that have gone against them. Those are not sustainable and not something I'm too worried about. So I don't think there's a big enough gap. I'm going to take Leverkusen plus the goal, minus 120.
All right. Very good, sir. Thanks so much for your time. Anthony Dabbundo, find him on the Action app for all of his soccer and baseball picks. Looking forward to the World Series. Don't try to find him on Halloween. He'll probably be somewhere in Philadelphia amongst the people. So thanks, pal. Good stuff.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Anthony Dabbundo is feeling really good about himself lately. I don't know about Tom Brady, though. I don't know. I mean, look at this guy right now. 2-game losing streak. When does that ever happen? He hasn't been very good, really, at all. That whole offense, that whole operation, it's probably the rock bottom scenario for Brady since he arrived in Tampa. However, as an underdog, Tom's pretty good. 8-3 against the spread, 11-0 straight up. His number or his record as an underdog of 3 or less is pretty solid. And that's why we welcome in Brandon Anderson now, who covers the NFL. He also covers the NBA over at Action Network. He does a great job, and you can catch him on our podcast content as well throughout the course of each and every week. So Brandon, we just laid out some numbers there. Brady historically as an underdog, it doesn't happen very often, as we know, but it's been really tough to watch this Bucs offense try to piece it together. Their defense gets shredded by backup running backs in Carolina. The wedding thing, you just add it all up. It not great with Tom. And now it's a short week, and you actually like Brady. You like Tampa this week.
I do, and I like the short week. Sometimes when you have a game like that, the best thing you can do is just get out right as fast as you can. Get out Thursday night, get that ugly taste out of your mouth, and get the win. Look, the Buccaneers have been, the whole time Tom Brady's been there, a much better home team than a road team. That's just been a thing that they haven't been able to get rid of. They lost to the Panthers. They lost to the Steelers the last 2 weeks, both on the road. You remember Washington a year ago, Chicago 2 years ago. Those are all road losses that Tampa Bay has had. And we tend, the 4 count. And this line, I think, is an overreaction to just what is just one really, really bad game against the Panthers. There's no sugarcoating. It was awful. but we moved this from -$3 on Sunday night to +2, 2.5 still at some books, 1.5. Make sure to shop around because this one has really bounced around. But I think this is an overreaction to just one really awful Buccaneers game. And I think we're underreacting to actually the Ravens struggling not nearly as much, but more consistently. We're seeing Baltimore game after game blow these big leads. Now, of course, they're building the leads, but both parts of that matter. Baltimore's passing numbers have fallen off a cliff. The run game has been strong, but now J.K. Dobbins is out again. And then the defense, just not what we assume the Ravens to be. They're 29th on EPA per play on defense. They're not pressuring the quarterback. That's a spot that's going to really let Tampa off the hook here with that line struggling. And as much as we talk about Tampa's injuries, Baltimore is somehow even more injured, I think, than Tampa right now. So I think it's a nice spot for Tom Brady to just get back out and get things going the right way. If you just ignore the teams and look at the spot here, underdogs of 3 or less that just lost as favorites by a bunch, by 11 or more, 61% against the spread. Teams that are coming off a short week after a close division game like the Ravens are, they're only 43% against the spread. So the line is telling us, and history is telling us, there's some value on the line. And then, Brendan, you mentioned some of those Tom Brady stats, and that's what kind of pushed it over the edge for me. 2-game losing streak, Brady in our system, undefeated after that, 11-0 straight up. And then the one that really got me, when Brady fails to cover by 14 or more points, the following game, he is 22-3 against the spread, 88% cover rate. That is a GOAT. That is a man who does not like to be embarrassed, who comes back the following week. He's not just covering by 10.5 points a game. He has won and covered 13 straight in that spot. I remember, I had my Tom Brady MVP ticket last year in December, 9-0. They get shut out by the Saints. It's ugly. It's on the road. It's bad. We all decide it's done. And then what happens the next week? 32-6, Bucks win. They get right back on track. I will bet against the GOAT when there's dirt on his grave. I will take the Buccaneers. I will happily take the points here.
What I keep coming back to also is their division is still very much up for grabs. So I think if they were looking ahead at, they had to look up in the standings and 2 teams are well ahead of them, then there could be some real turmoil there. Like, our season might be lost, but it feels like they're going to be fine. And they have a win in hand against Atlanta, a team that's up there with them as well. Baltimore getting 78% of the bets in this game, 70% of the money on Baltimore. That's according to the Action app. If you have a pro account, strongly encouraged to get the latest read on this game Thursday night. So hopefully we're in for a good game like we had last Thursday as far as scoring. Let's go to another pick that you have for this week. You're going to turn your attention to the AFC North, a team that is trending upward after really a rocky start. We didn't really know what to make of this team.
Yeah, I like the Bengals. We're going Monday night. So we'll do primetime double here, Thursday night, Monday night. And we just talked about the Falcons a second ago. The Bengals just played their best game of the season against Atlanta. They blew Atlanta out of the water, and they came out passing. 21 of their first 26 plays, passing the ball. Hey, look, you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Why don't we pass a little bit? How about that, Zach Taylor? How about pass the ball early and often? Now, Atlanta's secondary is really banged up, but the Browns profile really similarly to the Falcons. So this is a really similar matchup here. What do we have? We have a strong run game, run first team. They're going to be able to run a little bit. That's all right. Competent passing, nothing that really worries you. Not going to hold up in a shootout. And then no defense, not for the Browns, not for the Falcons. This sets up like the exact same script for the Bengals. So you mentioned their slow start. Cincinnati was 0-2. Since then, the Bengals are number 2 in DVOA in the entire NFL. That means ahead of teams that are, ahead of teams like Eagles, Chiefs, and Bills. They're beating some of these teams because they're number 2 on offense and EPA. And it's not just a fluke. I am a little worried. We never know if Zach Taylor is going to stick with that passing game, but it's a change in philosophy. They're going on shotgun now, getting out of that 11 system. They're going pass heavy. They're letting Joe Burrow cook. And I just don't think the Browns have the defense to hold up. Last month, they're 30th in EPA on defense. They're 28th in success rate. For the season, they're dead last in DVOA home defense. I think Cincinnati is going to move the ball. They're going to score. And the Browns can't win a shootout against this team. Jacoby Brissett, not the guy to win a shootout with against Joe Burrow and Chase and Higgins. Kevin Stefanski, you probably heard that stat, 3-11 ATS in division games. Actually, that includes 2-0 this year. So he was 1-11, but I think we're going to give him his first loss here. Good spot for Monday night road favorites here in this range. So I like the Bengals. I think they're going to go out and hit the road and get the job done here.
They haven't, can you believe this? They haven't allowed a second half touchdown this year.
It's been pretty remarkable. They're allowing something over the last 15 or so games. I think the Bengals are allowing something like 4 points a game in the second half. It's getting, if they can do this script where they open up early and pass and get a couple touchdowns and then just kind of tighten the grip late in the game, that defense has been much better than anyone gives it credit for. It's carried them while they figured the offense out. I like the Bengals a lot. If they were not in the conference with the Bills and the Chiefs, they would be a Super Bowl pick for me right now, but they might be right in that mix anyway.
Right. It's the name recognition of that defense, in my opinion. They don't have the big star names like the rest of these teams do as far as defensive stars. Brandon Anderson, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's have a look now. We turn our attention to the association, NBA leaders through the first couple of weeks of the season. Ja Morant has been very fun to watch. Of course, you've got on the rebounding numbers, Rudy Gobert has fit in nicely with Minnesota, and Trae Young dishing out the dimes down in the ATL. Blazers have been a fun story too, 4-0 against the spread. They're the only team in the league that is pacing the NBA, but also undefeated against the number. So with that being said, there's something else that we have to really pick apart here in the NBA. Let's hear from Matt Moore and how an NBA rule change has his antenna up.
I'm Matt Moore for the Action Network, and let's spread the floor. When the NBA made its rule change in the offseason to increase the penalty for the so-called take foul, bettors were curious what the impact might be. Would overs be up as teams had to actually try and defend in transition? Would the market overreact to the change and provide value on the unders? The rule change disincentivizes take fouls by ruling that if you make such a foul, it's one free throw and the opposing team retains possession. Adding at least a point on average to any possession is killer, and so teams are staying away. So far, we've only seen one take foul called. But what's been the betting impact? So far, there's nothing to write home about as a general trend in the macro. Overs are 50, 46, and 6 this season at 52%, so a slight but unimpressive edge to the over. However, if we start to tailor this to specific players, we're seeing something a lot higher. Let's start with Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know if you know this, but Giannis is an absolute monster. He's the most physically dominant player in today's game, as well as being second in MVP odds at multiple books. Last season, Antetokounmpo averaged 4.3 fast break points per game and 8.3 via Synergy Sports, including points drawn from free throws. This season, that's up to 10 points per game in the first two Bucks games and a whopping 12 points per game, including shooting foul, free throws drawn. But he could have scored so much more. Teams habitually chose to simply opt out of trying to defend Antetokounmpo in transition last season by just giving the take foul. Better to just get the train off the tracks and stand in front of it. But when Giannis gets downhill this season, if you're not able to use the take foul on him, he's getting to the rim, period, end dot. There's just no way to account for his combination of length, where he covers the floor in just a few strides, speed, and strength. That one take foul that's been handed out this season? Yeah, it was Giannis that drew that one. Giannis manhandled the Rockets on Saturday, and while Houston's defense leaves a lot to be desired, Giannis still racked up 9 points in transition in their season opener versus the Sixers. Giannis is an obvious example, though. Some other players who stand to benefit from this include Steph Curry, who's hit his points over prop 3 straight times to start the season, and Devin Booker, who is 4th in backcourt fouls last year and has hit his over twice so far this season. Booker averaged 6 transition points per game last season. That's up to 9 this season. We're still waiting to see how teams will adjust going forward and for samples to settle in, but don't be surprised if poor transition defensive teams give up higher opponent team totals, and if specific players show that they're better primed to take advantage of a rule change that lets stars be stars.
Well said, Matt Moore. Giannis pacing the NBA with 10 fast break points per game. Transition defense, the key to stop this guy. Bucks are home tonight to take on the Brooklyn Nets, who, believe it or not, I could not believe this when I looked it up. Granted, it's a small sample size. They haven't been that bad as far as their transition defense early in the season. So right now, Milwaukee is laying 4 points against the Nets at home. Matt, are you taking the cheese on Brooklyn being slightly better in transition defense, or are you thinking Milwaukee is just an opponent that could totally rip that trend apart?
Yeah, I think that's small sample, and I'm definitely expecting for the Bucks to absolutely tear them up in this, in part because their defense is better. They'll be able to get stops on there. If we look at this line, it's been bouncing back between 4 and 3.5 all day. It doesn't seem like it's going to be moving in any sort of major direction. I like Bucks -4 here. I like it obviously better at 3.5. If we take out home court advantage for the Bucks here, this line scales to -1.5 to 2 on a neutral. That doesn't sound right. With where the Bucks are at right now, this Nets team has looked disorganized. This Nets team looks disconnected. There's a huge coaching gap here in terms of how their teams are prepared. The Nets are second in points allowed in the paint per 100 possessions. So even though that transition defense might have been good so far, they're getting tore up on the interior. And we saw that in their game versus the Memphis Grizzlies. They have a really hard time. Part of that's because the Nets play a lot of switch, right? They play switch and at the level. They are not sinking to protect the rim. They want to guard you on the perimeter. This causes problems when you're facing a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo that you literally cannot stop from getting to the rim. So with no weak side rim protection, Giannis is going to have a night. And when they are forced to bring help, that's going to open up the 3-pointers. The Bucks have been better at their 3-point defense this season than they were to end last year. That's promising for them. And then you got like the matchup here between Giannis and KD. Giannis is 5-1 straight up and against the spread versus KD the last 2 seasons. Those are only games when those two guys have played. So for me, there's a huge edge here. The Bucks take this game seriously. The Bucks protect home court. The Nets, I'm sorry, I don't necessarily take them seriously as an NBA team right now. And that's pretty evident from how Ben Simmons looks. So I'll take the serious team, and I'm willing to lay the 4 with Milwaukee at home.
75% of the bets, 82% of the money, according to the Action app, coming in on Milwaukee. So the people like Milwaukee as well. 10-game slate. This is one of the 10 games. And again, Green Dot Daily is presented by BetMGM. We have a special promo for tonight's slate. NBA First Basket Score Insurance. All you have to do is opt into this promo. You then place a first basket score prop on any NBA game. And even if your bet loses, you'll receive your wager back in free bets up to $25 over at BetMGM. So that's fun. What do you like tonight, Matt Moore? Do you like someone in particular that could deliver on this prop?
Yeah, let's go with Grayson Allen plus 850, getting that nice plus 850 line on him. Key here is make sure he's starting. You can follow Fantasy Labs NBA on Twitter, and that's going to get you the starting lineups before this game comes out. The reason I say that is just in case Budenholzer wants to switch things up versus the Nets and their particular lineup going bigger with Bobby Portis and shifting everyone. But Grayson Allen should start with Chris Middleton still out. Allen's 4th highest in first minute usage rate the last 2 seasons. So amongst all Bucks players and across a pretty decent sample size when he's been starting, he's got the 4th highest usage rate in that first minute of play. He gets a lot of shots up in that first minute. 2nd and 3rd for the Bucks behind Giannis, not starting tonight. They're not available. So as long as Portis isn't starting, Chris Middleton's out. Those are 2 and 3. You got really good value here on Grayson Allen plus 850 to score the first field goal.
It kind of leads into your take too about, serious team, serious defense. Maybe the serious defense of the Nets doesn't kick in till like later in the game, but I like it. Grayson Allen also has a 3-point prop at 2.5 tonight. So that bodes well too, that there could be some opportunities for Grayson tonight. Matt Moore, thanks for stopping by. Great analysis on the new rule in the NBA as it pertains to the take file and tonight's analysis for this game.
Thanks, Brendan.
Hawaii money line, last leg of a round robin. I have 3 home. I just wasted 3 hours watching Hawaii, Colorado State try to play offense. Not only watch, but I paid to watch. I paid to watch. I had to pay for Spectrum TV, $4.99, added onto my bill to watch myself lose. Great. Hawaii.
Well, Hawaii football does not deliver against Colorado State. Collin Wilson, do you take the pleasure in staying up late to tune into the Rainbow Warriors break your heart often?
Yeah, I have a very strong connection with Hawaii because I do the power ratings for the Action Network, and that means I have to do all 131 teams. So at 3 a.m., I'm still doing Hawaii's number. But hey, they're a different team at home. I like them scoring points at home. So here we go this weekend.
Yeah, there you go. They're home this weekend against Wyoming. Collin Wilson covers college football for Action Network. Nice enough to stop by Green Dot Daily to get set for week 9 in college football. And the slate starts with a good one Thursday night. We've got Utah, a top 25 team. The Utes, that emotional win over USC. That was a couple weeks ago now because they're coming off the bye. Washington State is hosting. They're coming off the bye. Both teams are 4-3 against the number this season, Colin. I don't know. I got questions about this Washington State running game, but they can sling it around. We know Utah is a very formidable offense. Cougars play well against Utah at home. That's been the case for the last decade or so. How do you handicap this game? It should be a good one.
Yeah, the Cougars are always good at home. They're especially always good against Utah. And if you look at Utah, they have been really pretty bad away from Rice Eccles. I think they've covered 3 of their last 9 when they haven't been at home. And this series has historically just been a problem. Both teams are coming off of a bye week, but at the same time, Utah, just not being the same team. If you have Pac-12 futures like I do, this is a good time to look at Washington State on the money line. But I am going to go Washington State on the spread here, not just because of trends or what Utah does on the road, but the fact that their defense is just completely underrated for the Cougars. They're 17th in defensive finishing drives. Opponents that get balls past the 40-yard line are not scoring a lot of points. And on the offensive side, I know you mentioned their rushing game for Washington State, but Cam Ward is a transfer quarterback coming in from Incarnate Word, and he can be electric, especially in passing downs when they're, it's kind of busted plays and open pockets. And that's where Utah really struggles. They're 117th in defending explosiveness when opponents are in passing downs. So expect Washington State to make some plays when it's 3rd and 16, which could result in enough touchdowns to cover this spread.
Fair enough. Yeah, they had a nice game against USC on the ground, and but yeah, their overall number rushing yards per game is at the basement of the league. So we'll see. That's fair though. Yeah, that's fair. And big spots, their passing spots, they can certainly break through in certain circumstances with the quarterback. Let's look ahead to the weekend. We have 3 top 25 matchups on the Saturday card, including Ohio State and Penn State. Ohio State has been very impressive. They've been making steady improvements throughout the course of the year. They've been climbing in your rankings, Brett McMurphy's rankings, as far as how you look at this team down the stretch. They've got a lot of aspirations, of course, for later in the year, December, maybe even early January. But how do you look at this game? What approach do you take to maybe betting it?
Yeah, the best bet in this game is the over rushing props on the running backs for Ohio State. That'd be Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. Don't forget that Michigan destroyed this Penn State defensive front. They ran away PJ Mustafa in the defensive interior and, had tons of explosive plays. And that defense has not gone away. I mean, they're still there. It was just covered up by the fact that Clifford was able to throw for a bunch of touchdowns. So the best bet is at Ohio State's running backs. And if you go listen to Ryan Day pressers, we want to be a blue collar team. We want to prove that we can run the ball. The only way we win the college football playoff is if we run the ball. They're going to do that here. So Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson over the rushing props.
Okay, very good. Let's move on. And by the way, Ryan Day, New Hampshire native. Love that guy, Ryan Day. UNH football, man. I have some ties there. Anyway, moving on to Michigan State. This game, Michigan's coming off a bye. A lot of teams coming off the bye that we've discussed so far. But Michigan, as you mentioned, really impressive performance against Penn State. They did a little bit of everything to take down the Nittany Lions. How do you project how they look against Michigan State? Is this a game you have any sort of read on?
Well, in the Big Ten media days, Harbaugh was very adamant about how we have certain goals for this season. And of course, it's, win the Big Ten, win the national championship, beat Ohio State. But in there is beat Michigan State. And we failed against those goals last year. We did not beat Michigan State on our run to the college football playoff last year. And this is a really big game to him. The problem is I project this at 54. That's where the total is. I project this at Michigan minus 20. There's a boost in the market up for Michigan because Michigan State has just been lifeless on defense. So this could be an absolute rout. But as investors, with my money, I'm not going to go throw money down because there's a revenge angle. I mean, the number, it's like inflation. It's just too much of the cost to be putting on Michigan. So it's a pass for me.
Fair enough. Moving on to our final game. Everyone talking about Tennessee, rightfully so. Tennessee with that monster victory over Alabama. They're now taking on Kentucky, and they've been a feisty bunch this season. How do you assess this matchup?
This is probably the last time I'm fading Tennessee. There's a lot of correlation to the LSU team of 2019, where math guys like myself could not catch up with where the market was, and LSU ended up covering every game that season. Tennessee is following in that mold quickly. But for this game, the number should be 8. So I'm taking Kentucky. Would prefer it at 13. I think it's going to steam back up out of this dead zone and get back to 13. I love the over even more. This game was 45-42 last year because Kentucky's head coach Mark Stoops did not mind the up tempo, decided to run it with them, and he was just lost by 3 points in that game. I think he's willing to take that, roll the dice, go up tempo, and get that one possession score game in the fourth quarter again. So love the over more, but I think Kentucky covers the current number.
Okay, over getting 55% of the money, 39% of the bets, according to the Action app. The Wildcats are 12.5-point underdogs taking on Tennessee. And sorry, no disrespect to Tennessee Martin, but I consider Tennessee's last game was against Alabama, because how do you forget that kind of finish? But Collin Wilson, thanks for stopping by, and hopefully we don't have to listen to any voicemails about Wyoming beating Hawaii at home.
Yeah, keep winning and they won't come. So I will. We'll see what they do.
Thanks, man. So a lot to unpack from today's show. It is one of the best times of year in terms of sports and just something on the calendar at every given time. So let's recap today's Wednesday bet slip. Anthony Dabbundo joined us. He's got a couple of soccer picks. He's also encouraging you to get in on Rhys Hoskins to win World Series MVP. World Series starts on Friday, so he likes Hoskins despite all of the hype on Bryce Harper coming into the 118th Fall Classic. Brandon Anderson with a pair of NFL picks for us, including Thursday night, likes Tampa at 2.5. Be sure to wait for that number to rise. Matt Moore's on the Bucks tonight against the Nets, and there are Collin Wilson's picks for Thursday night in college football and a look ahead to the weekend, as we just discussed. As a reminder, all picks from the show at green.daily, you can find that account over on the Action app. So green.daily, there is an account dedicated to this show, so you can find all of our picks on a daily basis. Green.daily is noon Eastern every weekday, so be sure to join us for all the latest in the sports betting world. Thanks to all of our guests, all the folks behind the scenes. I'm Brendan Glasheen. As a reminder, Green.daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. Terms and conditions apply. Best of luck. Let's get those green dots today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.